Good morning. Ever since sin entered into this world, humans have been beset by all sorts of diseases and troubles. But in order to make this life as bearable as possible, God has very kindly given us laws to keep us as free as possible from these things. He gave the Israelites a remarkable law. It was 3,500 years in advance of its time. And this law was so remarkable, it has given quite a few doctors reason to believe that it could only have come from God. So we'll have a quick look at it. In Deuteronomy 7, God says to the Israelites, listen to these ordinances. Yahweh will keep all sickness far from you. He will not afflict you with those evil plagues of Egypt. If we bear in mind that Moses was brought up in the court of Pharaoh and he knew of the magic and the sorcery and the superstition attached to their medicine, none of that appears in the law of Moses, which is remarkable. So what did God tell the Israelites to do to keep them healthy? We'll have a look at sewage first. Lovely subject. Even in the Middle Ages, sewage was thrown into the streets, and it's no wonder they didn't live much beyond 40. Now, some ancient civilizations had sewage disposal systems, but they consisted of drains full of water. They emptied them into rivers, which disposed of the problem, but with no thought to who lived downstream, and there was no understanding of bacteria. The Israelites, by contrast, Deuteronomy 23, you must make a latrine outside the camp. Human waste was to be buried, covered up. Now in the wilderness, it would soon compost and become actually quite okay. But there were well over 1 million Israelites, so what the Lord did was he got them to move every so often so that sewage didn't become a problem for them. Now, leprosy was quite common in those days, but the law of Moses insisted on quarantining. They were still looked after, given food. I suppose they'd have liniments to help with the condition, but they were to be outside the camp. And this kept leprosy to a minimum. Now that ordinance was way ahead of its time. Even in the 18th century, leprosy was a serious problem in southern Europe, and it wasn't until they went to the law of Moses, realized that they should be quarantining these ones, when leprosy suddenly became less of a problem. Food. The Israelites weren't allowed to eat pork or other wild meat. They could pick up from this meat trichinosis, which came from a particular worm, which is quite nasty. You could pick up salmonella. The list of pathogens in wild meat is very long. In lamb and pork, it's not so bad. Now, they weren't allowed even to eat the fat of lamb and pork. Now, we know today why, and that's because animal fat can clog up your arteries. They needed oils in their diet, but they got it from olive oil, a healthy fat. If they killed an animal, the blood was to be poured out. Now, it was given a religious significance. The life of the animal was considered to be in the blood. It was to be poured out. This was a health safeguard. The pathogens in blood are enormous. Blood is a very good medium for breeding bacteria. And slaughterhouses today will pour out the blood because if it's left in the meat, it will spoil quickly, especially if you don't have refrigeration, which of course they didn't in those days. So, we come on now to moral laws. Incest and other immorality, rape, was to be punished with capital punishment. So it was very rare in the Israelites' culture. Other cultures, their worship of vile gods included rape and prostitution, and the diseases that they picked up was horrendous. The Israelites were spared that. incest laws 3,500 years ago were quite innovative, and that actually affects our lives today. The Mosaic Law affects us far more than we think it does. Now we come on to animal welfare. A bull was not to be muzzled if it was threshing the grain. It could eat what it wanted, and that was kind. A calf or a lamb was to stay with its mother for 7 days at least. Now, there were strange ethical laws. No animal could be slaughtered on the same day as its young, and a kid was not to be boiled in its mother's milk. Now, this wouldn't affect the animal. The mother wouldn't know if her young had been boiled. But it seems to me that it taught the Israelites compassion. You might have views on that yourself. If so, put them in the comments. Now, the mainstay of the law was that they were to love God and to love their neighbours. And this would, of course, produce a nice society. And it even works really well today. If we're kind to our neighbours, they are kind back to us. Now, there were some interesting laws considering this. In Deuteronomy 22, if you see your neighbour's animals straying, you're obliged to help. In verse 4, it says, you must not make off when you see your brother's ox or donkey fall on the road. You must stay and help your brother put it on its feet. You weren't to pretend that you couldn't see this happening. So, all these things help us to see that this had to be from God, because it's only today that we know why these things were so important in those ancient civilizations. We can be so grateful to our God. So thank you so much for watching, and take care, and God bless.